Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving into the life of one of modern India's most complex and honestly most debated figures, Vinayak Damodar Savarkar. We're going to unpack his story through the lens of a biography titled Sinhpurush, which, translates to The Lion Man.
Now, this right here, this was the solemn vow a young Savarkar made before a statue of the goddess Bhavani. And this wasn't just some casual promise. According to the biography, this was a statement of absolute life-or-death commitment that would pretty much define the rest of his turbulent life.
So, who was this man? How do you even begin to understand him? Well, the book takes us through these really distinct and often clashing phases of his life. You've got the revolutionary, the prisoner, the political thinker, and the social reformer, all wrapped up in one person. Okay, let's get into it.
First up, the biography paints a picture of Savarkar as this young, fiery revolutionary. He's a man forged in the heat of that early 20th century anti-colonial anger. And for him, this wasn't some slow burn. It was more like an explosion.
And his radicalization? It happened fast. The book points to these key moments that basically transformed him from a student into an organizer of armed rebellion. And he's doing this from London, right in the heart of the British Empire, smuggling guns back to India disguised as, get this, sweets. The audacity is just incredible.
Well, you can't exactly orchestrate a revolution and expect nobody to notice. This path led him directly to being captured, and to one of the most brutal, most infamous imprisonments in all of Indian history.
And this part of the story, it's straight out of an action movie. The biography describes this crazy escape attempt while he's being shipped back to India for trial. He literally squeezes his body through a tiny ship's porthole, leaps into the open ocean, and swims for his life trying to reach France. He was caught, yeah, but that leap, it became the stuff of legend.
So, what was the price for all this revolutionary activity? A sentence that's almost impossible to wrap your head around. 50 years. Not just 50 years, but 2 life sentences, back-to-back, in the Andaman Islands. They called the place Kala Pani, the Black Water, for a reason. It was basically a one-way ticket.
But even in a place designed to break people, the poet in him refused to be silenced. The book tells us that, since they took away his pen and paper, he just found a thorn. And with that thorn, he scratched over 10,000 lines of poetry onto the walls of his cell, memorizing every single word. It's just an amazing testament to his willpower.
So after 13 incredibly long years, he's finally released from the Andamans. But he's still not free. Not really. He's under house arrest in a town called Ratnagiri. And it's here that we see this massive pivot, a shift away from armed revolution and towards building a whole new political and social ideology. It was during this confinement that he wrote his most famous and, let's be honest, his most controversial text, Hindutva. This was the book where he laid out his entire vision for what India's identity was and should be. It's an ideology that would not only define his own political journey, but would also go on to shape Indian politics for decades.
And here's where things get really complex, because the biography points out this major contrast. At the exact same time he's writing this hardline political ideology, he's also leading a pretty radical campaign for social reform. He's on the ground in Ratnagiri fighting against untouchability, organizing dinners to break caste barriers, and pushing for temple entry for everyone.
So once he's finally fully released, his influence starts to grow. And naturally, that puts him on a direct collision course with the single most dominant political force of that era, Mahatma Gandhi.
And when I say they clashed, I mean they were on opposite sides of pretty much every major issue. Take the Khilafat movement. Gandhi supported it for Hindu-Muslim unity, but Savarkar called it a calamity. Or look at the partition of India. Savarkar was fiercely, vehemently against it, putting him completely at odds with where things eventually landed. Their visions for India just could not have been more different.
And all of this conflict, this ideological battle, it leads us to the most controversial, most charged event of his entire life. After India's independence, Mahatma Gandhi was assassinated, and Vinayak Savarkar was accused of being part of the conspiracy.
So now he's on trial for his life in the famous Red Fort. And Savarkar, if you remember, he was a trained lawyer. So he chooses to defend himself. And his big moment? He stands up in court and reads from a massive 52-page handwritten statement, meticulously taking apart every charge against him.
Now, what did the prosecution really have? Well, according to the book, their whole case pretty much hinged on the testimony of one man, an approver. But under cross-examination, his story starts to get shaky. He says he recognized Savarkar's voice, but then admits it's only because he already knew Savarkar lived there. That's a crucial weakness, and it really damaged his credibility.
So after months of an intense trial, with the whole country watching, the verdict finally came in. The court decided there just wasn't enough evidence to convict. Vinayak Damodar Savarkar was acquitted of all charges.
All right, so let's jump forward now, decades later, to the final chapter of his life. And in a move that was completely in character, Savarkar made one last profound decision to go out entirely on his own terms.
He was 82 years old. He felt his life's work was done, and his body was failing him. So the biography says he decided to undertake something called Prayopavesa, which is basically a voluntary, conscious fast until death. For him, this wasn't suicide. He saw it as a dignified end to a life that he felt was complete.
So, what do we make of this Lion Man? You know, the biography doesn't really give you a neat little box to put him in. It leaves you with this person made of so many different, often contradictory parts. Was he the revolutionary freedom fighter? The polarizing ideologue? The social reformer? The poet? The thing is, he was all of them.
Ultimately, the Sinhpurush account doesn't offer a simple verdict. It just presents the man in all his complexity, a man who fought like hell for his vision of India, who is praised as a patriot and condemned as a partisan. And it leaves us with the big question: how do you remember a figure with so many profound contradictions? That's the contested legacy of the man they called the Lion.